What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Morello Show, episode number 25. It's a big one. It's a quarter century mark. So I don't know how we made it here, but we did, and I am very thankful for it. Today it's a very special podcast because the NHL trade deadline is coming up, and Rangers fans, we got something to play for this year, finally. So this is important, and we have an important guest on too. We have Greg Kaplan, who is the co-host of the Blue Shirts Breakaway podcast, number one Rangers podcast, of course. Greg, how are you?
Good, man. How are you? Good to be here. Good to see you.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We're about 2 weeks away from the trade deadline, so this is a very important time in the Rangers season, I guess. So there's a lot to talk about. So we're gonna get into it. First and foremost, obviously they've been linked to a lot of players. And we'll get into some of those first. Very various different positions and skill sets and needs and whatnot. What would you say is the Rangers' biggest holes first and foremost? Like, what are they trying to fill come the deadline?
I There are two answers to that question, right? There's what I think the Rangers' biggest issue is versus what I think the Rangers think their biggest issue is. To me, the obvious one is they've been a forward short all year, specifically in the middle six, and it's been made even worse with the extended absence of Cabo. But this team, as great as Igor is, as great as the power play is, and as solid, if unspectacular, the defense is, the one thing this team is not good at is producing offense at even strength. They haven't been able to do it consistently. The combination of Ryan Strome and Artemi Panarin have been stop and go all year because I think we have the evidence that suggests those two players play best if they have a reliable, consistent third man that they can play with night in, night out. And, whether it's been Jesper Foss, whether it's been Colin Blackwell, the player doesn't have to be spectacular, right? It just has to be a reliable dude. And this year they've been rotating between Dryden Hunt, Barclay Goodrow, Philip Hedl. They looked at their best with Kakko, and then Kakko was taken off that line and put on the top line with Mika and Kreider. And it just hasn't looked the same since Kakko left. And now we don't know exactly when Kakko's coming back. We know that Hunt's not it. We know that Goodrow hasn't been it, as good as Goodrow has been in other regards. So this team desperately needs a guy who plays with those two significant contributors for the New York Rangers at 5v5 and can bring stability to the line. And then when Kakko comes back, that player needs to do something no player has been able to do on the New York Rangers this year, which is make the third line even relatively competent offensively. Lafreniere wasn't able to do it, and we've seen how good he's been in the top six. Philip Hedl hasn't been able to do it. Julien Gauthier hasn't been able to do it. They haven't given Morgan Barron a chance to do it. So to me, the Rangers very clearly need that middle six winger, and there are plenty of them available. Just a matter of how many you or what you want to give up in order to get one. But then, if you ask Ranger management, I think they want a defensively reliable bottom six forward as well, especially now with Kevin Rooney out. And I don't think they are overly satisfied with what's going on with Patrick Nemeth on the bottom pair, even if we can chalk it up as just honestly COVID being COVID and really screwing with a man's immune system and stamina, and why the Rangers don't believe in Zach Jones or don't want to give Jones Schneider a legitimate trust in this season beyond you and me. But I think they're poking around for a veteran defenseman to at least keep their options open. But first and foremost, they need offense. It needs to come on the form of, in my opinion, a winger. And it's been a clear need for this team since day one of the season.
No, absolutely. And I was thinking about this earlier today. I kind of compare so far this season to what we saw in the 2012-2015 era. Obviously, the Rangers were unbelievable. We made 3 Eastern Conference Finals, made 1 Stanley Cup, but we were relying on Henrik Lundqvist to get us there. And it worked to an extent, but, we didn't have enough of crazy, good pieces in the playoffs. Obviously, we had talent that didn't perform like Rick Nash and others like that per se. But do you see this team kind of relying too much on Igor's success this year? Because right now he's arguably in the conversation for Hart Trophy, definitely in the Vezina. And we've been great, but we've also had a lot of times where he's only let up one goal and he has the best save percentage in the league and all these things. Do you think they're relying on him too much to be in the position where we are right now?
I don't know if relying on is the right word. I'll go so far to say that if you take Igor Shesterkin off this team, it's just not a playoff team. So it's not even that they're, and this isn't a knock on the New York Rangers. It's just you look at how they've played. It's a team that doesn't, no team that scores as little as the New York Rangers score should be in the standings position that they are in. It's like in baseball, when your pitching staff is so good that it's just not giving up runs, that you're winning every game 2-0. At some point, a team that scores that little, it does come back to bite you when the pitching corrects back to the mean. Now, the crazy thing with Igor Shesterkin is, like, there might not be regression on him. He could just be this spectacular and this great. And the Rangers have seen it before. You brought up the playoff teams from way back yonder at this point. You know what's crazy? That it's been 10 goddamn years since that 2012 team. Like, what has happened? What has happened to time? But we've talked about this on our show a little bit. The clear difference between those late era Tortorella, very beginning Alain Vigneault teams is the floor on those teams in terms of their wingers and defensemen was so high, right? You didn't have superstars on that team, but you had zero holes. You take, like, Jágr notwithstanding, but the Derek Stepans, the Ryan McDonoughs, the Matt Zuccarellos, the Derek Brassards, the back then Mark Stalls, Dan Girardis. These guys weren't superstars. They weren't household names outside of New York, but these were steady, reliable, consistent hockey players. You look at that third line, the identity line they had that featured Benoit Pouliot and company. It was solid the entire way down. The fourth line, the Derek Dorsets, the players the Rangers were able to run out up and down their lineup had zero holes. They had no issues anywhere. Whereas with this Ranger team, your ceiling is spectacularly high, right? On any given night, Mika Zibanejad can score 4 goals. On any given night, Chris Kreider can score 3 tip-ins. On any given night, Artemi Panarin can have 6 points. On any given night, Adam Fox can create 7 scoring opportunities on himself. But this team's underbelly is very soft. The bottom 6 is as good as Barclay Goodrow has been this year. The bottom 6 has not been good. As solid as Braden Schneider has been since he's gotten up here, it's been problematic finding a defensive partner for either him or Lundqvist that's been consistent on a nightly basis. And again, this isn't a criticism. Like, I can't sit here and blame Patrick Nemeth for getting COVID. And COVID, it infects everybody a little differently, right? And some people, it's a walk in the park. And other people, like, there are long haulers. We don't know what's going to happen to them in the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. It is what it is. It's just that we haven't been able to figure out that defensive partner. You haven't necessarily gotten everything you've wanted from the Rangers penalty killing at times. You haven't gotten everything. I mean, hell, as great as Mika and Zibanejad have, I'm sorry, obviously Mika and Zibanejad, Mika and Kreider have been this year. Yeah, those two have been great, but hasn't been until recently that we found a winger that goes with them. Look at, again, we already talked about Strome and Panarin. We haven't figured that out. Haven't figured out anything on the third line. And the fourth line, you knew what you were getting with this Ranger fourth line the day it was created, the day Ryan Reeves walked in here. You weren't getting a guy who was going to put up defensive performances on a nightly basis that your team can rely on late in games, but his identity has been super important to this Ranger team. You were hoping that whatever Reeves was going to give up on the ice, someone else would be able to pick up the slack, and that just hasn't been the case. So it's nuts looking at those teams from 2012 to 2015, where Hank was playing at the top of his power, but the lineup itself you weren't ever going to get spectacular, but you weren't ever going to get bad. Now you look at this Ranger team, you got Igor Shesterkin playing possibly the best individual goalie season in New York Rangers history.
Which is saying something.
Which
like
is
a
saying
lot.
something. Again, this is a team that's had Mike Richter, that one great year of Mike Dunham, everything Henrik Lundqvist did, Eddie Giacomin. You go back, this organization has been built on the backs of great goalies. And Igor Shesterkin is doing something none of those guys have done. But as spectacular as this lineup can look on one night, can look terrible on other nights. And it's just the range of emotions with this team, the mercurialness of this squad. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. And it makes you wonder how all this happens. And it also makes you wonder and makes you appreciate why this team should probably go all in at the trade deadline when you consider the amount of cap space that they have, the lack of cap space they have in the future, the performances of the players that they have, and the clear and obvious areas they can improve. So it's this perfect storm of chaos that we're going to get in the next 2 weeks.
And it's going to be wild because, like you said, like going forward, we don't have cap space. It's all tied up. We're all committed to people, which is fine. I mean, we have a lot of centerpieces in place, but this is the last year we can, have that kind of flexibility. And another thing also I want to go back to, you pointed out kind of the baseball analogy for my Mets fans out there, which I'm not sure if you are or not, but
you're not sure if I am or not.
I feel
like I've made the Mets my entire brand at this point in time.
Well, true. Besides the Rangers, yes, the Mets are up there, but I am also a Mets fan, and compared to like last year's team, for example, or like Jacob deGrom's career with the Mets, like he'll put up a whole bunch of 1 and 0 run performances, and we still can't win. Now, obviously, the Rangers are winning with Igor, but if you don't have the flip side of it in place to support him, which is the offense, it's not going to do anything for us, which is why the Mets haven't been successful in the last few years. And, hopefully the Rangers can change the tide on that. Now, we're going to go into some trade pieces here because there's been some rumors swirling around, and I want to know your opinion on some guys who we could potentially trade for. So we're going to start off with one that I heard today, this is on Monday, the March 7th. And I hate it so much, but Claude Giroux has been linked to us a little bit. I don't want to see that, but he's still pretty good. What do you think of the potential of Claude Giroux wearing the blue, red, and white?
See, you will not have anyone on this podcast who hates the entire city of Philadelphia more thoroughly and completely than myself. I want to make that very clear up front because I
hate their sports teams, but I do live there, so I don't hate the city, but I do hate the
I do. I see the Temple Owls flag behind you. My fun fact, little story. My guidance counselor back in high school, Jesus, this is 15 years ago to this point. We were going through colleges that she wanted me to apply to. And she's like, have you thought about Temple? And I was like, Temple, wait, remind me where that is. And she said, Philadelphia. And I literally told her, fuck no, anywhere else. And she's like, okay, don't need the language. And I was like, you did. You clearly don't know me if you think that's a place I would go. I respect Temple. I respect the dude who, it's St. Joseph's, the guy who flaps his arm the entire game, right? The mascot. Yes. Okay. Well, I like Temple. I've won money off Temple in the past, but my thorough being of hating Philadelphia is through and through. But I say all that when I say this. Claude Giroux is probably one of the 4 most perfect pieces for the New York Rangers because you have to consider he has the ability to play center. He has the ability to play right wing. He checks every 200 hockey men box, which is playoff experience, has been there before, put through the ringer, veteran clubhouse leader, obviously captain in Philadelphia. He does everything off the ice that you would expect an old hockey man to really love. All while he's still one of the more valuable forwards that could be acquired at this year's deadline. He's a two-way, old-fashioned 200-foot hockey player who has the ability to score at even strength, doesn't have to play on your power play, and if you wanted to play him on the penalty kill, can do so effectively. So he is actually one of the more perfect pieces the Rangers could go after. My problem is I just can't see a scenario in which he accepts a trade to the New York Rangers. So I really haven't allowed myself to get too caught up on the idea of Claude Giroux being a Ranger. I know we we know that they have an affinity for Vitaly Kraskov. So there is a deal that could be done between the two teams. But I think it comes down to what Giroux wants to do. And until proven otherwise, I don't have a feeling that he wants to come to New York.
I would agree with that, especially just because of the rivalry that the Rangers and the Flyers have, and over the years, and there's been playoff battles, and there's been outdoor series games and whatnot. So
I mean, it's not just that; it goes even deeper. It goes back to draft night when Giroux thought he was going to the New York Rangers, and then the Rangers audibled at the last second, took Bobby Sanguinetti, and with the very next pick, Giroux went to the Flyers. And Giroux has used that as a motivational chip his entire career since he's played the Rangers.
As he should.
Yeah, to be fair, Rangers fucked that up pretty thoroughly.
I'd say so.
I don't think it's any competition who the better player was on that day, and it's bored out that way. So it's unfortunate. But yeah, I struggle to see a scenario where Giroux signs off on a deal in New York.
I would also agree with that. Even though, like you said, it would definitely help us. He's still a valuable player on both ends of the ice, but I can't see it, and it would just be weird. Like, I don't even know if I would want it. Like, I would want it because he'd be helpful, but it would freak me out. It would absolutely freak me out. But we'll get into some other names here. This one, I feel like it's a name linked to us. It's possible, but it might cost too much, and that's Tomas Hertl of the San Jose Sharks. How do you feel about Tomas Hertl? Do you want him? Do you think we'd have to give up too much for him? Do you think his contract's too expensive? What do you think?
Well, I mean, again, he's a free agent at the end of the year. I think the biggest reason why someone wouldn't want Hertl, as a devil's advocate opinion, is that there's no way for the Rangers to re-sign. Just none. It would require trading Chris Kreider or Jacob Trouba this offseason, which the Rangers aren't going to do. So there's no way to acquire Hertl with the possibility of extending him out. None. You have to accept that the second you sign off on the deal. Now, I'm of the opinion where the New York Rangers are in a unique spot where they are one of the few teams that could realistically win the Stanley Cup, especially if they go out and acquire Hertl. And that's the whole point of all of this. It's not, you can't win multiple cups until you win one, right? So everyone's saying, I wouldn't trade one cup for three. Well, you got to win one before you can get to three. So I'm not overly worried about, oh, well, the Rangers won't have Hertl for more than a couple months. They'll lose out on someone like Niels Lundqvist, or they'll lose out on a couple first-round picks. I don't care. This team, the way Igor is playing, can win a cup this year. And Tomas Hertl makes that a more likely proposition in my mind. So I'm not worried about giving up a pile of assets, as long as they're, again, I'm not saying trade anything in it. Like, I'm not trading Lafreniere, I'm not trading Kakko, but I'd trade I'd trade Othman in a second for Hertl. I have no hesitation in saying that. I'd trade
I was going to say some guys like Lundqvist or like Schneider or people like that. Like, are they supposed to get moved, or what, depending on who the player is? Like
I don't think there's a player out there the Rangers will move Schneider for. I don't think. I think that's how highly the Rangers believe in Braden Schneider, which is fine and good. I don't necessarily agree with that assessment, but at the same time, can't sit here and say anything bad about the kid. He's been fantastic since day one when he came up this year. But I think the Rangers are more likely to move Othman this deadline than they are Schneider. I'm very confident in saying that. There's no combination outside of, as long as Kakko and Lafreniere are on the table for Hertl, I can talk myself into any combination of players and picks from that way on easily.
Yeah, I mean, and we have a lot of assets too. I mean, obviously we still have first round picks, which is weird being a Rangers fan because we got rid of them for quite some time at one point. Lundqvist has been involved in trade talks. I've heard Kakko's name. I really, really hope we don't trade him. Another huge one, which I don't think we've talked about yet, is Vitaly Kraskov. How do you view his situation, and will he get moved at the deadline, and do other teams value him as much as where his talent is because of all the stuff that's happened?
He's getting moved. I don't know when he's getting moved anymore. I honestly don't know how world conflicts of the current day are complicating whether players can and will return from Russia in the next couple months, I don't know. I have no idea. It could have no impact. It could have a massive impact. And I'm sure NHL teams are talking about this on an almost daily basis. And it's something that is being considered as you and I are discussing hypotheticals here. He will not play another game for the New York Rangers. That relationship is completely done. I think he still has every possibility of being an extraordinarily talented winger in the NHL. I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but there's nothing that will keep him from having an extremely productive middle six winger career that scores between 25 goals and 50-ish points as a topped out mark in his career. He's going to be fine. The Rangers have absolutely diminished his value with how they've handled the entire situation. I don't think he is any longer a prospect you can use as a centerpiece in a deal. His value just isn't there because the Rangers have shown teams that he is not valuable to them. So if he's not valuable to you, the organization trying to trade him, why would the organization acquiring him see him as more valuable in their eyes?
Well, do you think another franchise could see him as like a reclamation project of some type?
Absolutely. I think teams still like him and I think teams still want him, but I think teams understand they don't have to pay the New York Rangers to get him. You know what I mean? So that's the point I'm trying to make. It is not an evaluation of whether the Flyers actually want Vitaly Kraskov. They're also not going to give anything up in their eyes in a 1-for-1 to get him because they don't think they have to. They don't think they have to pay the Rangers very much to quote unquote take him off their hands in their eyes. That's the point I'm making on the Kraskov front, more so than saying like he has no trade value in terms of I don't think he's going to be good. He doesn't have a very high trade value because the New York Rangers have just not shown their value in him. So other teams don't look at him being like, oh yeah, no, well, start with him and we'll build from there. Any of these trade talks we're having at this deadline, it's starting around one other player and you build out from there. And Kraskov will be one of the pieces included in the building out. But he is long past the point of being the centerpiece of a deal for any team.
And it's unfortunate because you see the talent there, but there's just been a lot that's happened with him and the Rangers over the last couple of years.
It's even more unfortunate because, again, what's the one thing this New York Rangers team has needed since opening night? Middle six winger. What is Vitaly Kraskov? A middle six winger. They had the answer to their own question the entire season, and they immediately screwed that one up before the puck was even dropped on opening night.
And we wouldn't even need to be having these discussions about the depth of the middle six and whatnot because we had it. But like you said, they messed it up, which is unfortunate. But hopefully they will redeem themselves by acquiring another asset that we can use for a cup run. There was one more player I wanted to talk about before hearing your predictions of what we do, and that's Mark Giordano. Of course, he's on the Seattle Kraken, first year in the league. He's had a good career. He's been in trade talks a lot. Do you see the Rangers trying to make a move for him? I know you mentioned that they think they need defensive depth. So do you see that as a viable option?
I don't. Only if they decide they can't get a winger, because I think it will take a first-round pick to get Giordano, and I don't think the Rangers want to allocate that high of an asset for a position they don't feel is a clear and obvious need or area for upgrade. Like if the Rangers could trade a third or a fourth for a Kulak in Montreal, I think that's more the defensive upgrade, quote unquote, that they would be looking for. I think they want to save their first round pick and high end prospects for an offensively gifted winger. But if they can't find one, I think they would see Giordano as such a clear and obvious upgrade to their defensive lineup. And again, the makeup of the room, the guy who has been there, blah, blah, blah. Then I can see the Rangers going down that path. But I don't think the Kraken are going to wait for the Rangers to get to that point. I think some other team will come in with a first-round draft pick, scoop up Giordano, and the Rangers will just have to be shopping elsewhere.
Which is fair. I mean, like you said, the the offense is more the priority. And I agree. I mean, the defense has been fine, and you have Igor in the net, so it's obviously going to be great. But they need to score goals in order to win games if you have such a good goalie. So that's that. Final thoughts, your predictions on who the Rangers might get this 2022 NHL trade deadline.
I've been on the Kessel train since I think October, so I'm not getting off it now. It has always made a ton of sense. The Rangers are one of the few teams where they don't need to worry about the Coyotes eating money. They could just take the entire year, deal with it, play them, and give up very little in order to do it. So I'm a big believer that Kessel's going to be a guy. I do think they're going to go out and get like a Cale Yarncrook type from Seattle, a bottom six defensive forward who can win faceoffs and can play wing and center. And I don't see them getting a defenseman at all. But I also don't see them trading Alexander Georgiev. So I don't know what the heck the Rangers have decided to do.
So many options.
Yeah, they're gonna have to move him this summer for sure. They'll have no choice. But I don't see them feeling confident that they can move him before the deadline. So I will go pretty conservative. I would hope the Rangers go out and get Hurdle. That is what they should do. But I think the Rangers are going to go the way of the New York Mets from the last season, where the Mets could have done anything, decided just to do one thing, and it didn't end up working. And I think the Rangers will get Kessel, and I think they'll get a Yarncrook type, and I think they'll call it a deadline and say Capo Caco is like the addition of a trade deadline acquisition when he comes back.
Sandy Alderson special.
The Sandy Alderson special, man, drives me up a wall. But as much as I don't know if anyone has been as vocal as wanting the Rangers to swing big than I have been. I from where I am, from what I've heard, I can't honestly see them taking a huge swing. So I think they're going to make a couple conservative moves that will certainly help the team a little bit, but not help the team as much as I would like them to. And this team is just they're going to need Igor Shesterkin to continue to be Igor Shesterkin if they want to go deep in the playoffs.
Which is, he's shown it all year, but it's obviously tough to continue to rely on throughout, the spring and summer. So we will see what happens with that. I think Kessel could be good too. I mean, he's still a valuable player, and he has experience, like you've mentioned a few times, with Giordano and Giroux and whatnot. So that could be good, but I agree with you. I hope they swing big, even if it's for someone like Hurdle, who, even though he's a rental, I think he's that good that we could potentially win a cup, which is the goal. We haven't won a cup since 1994. I personally have never been allowed to see one. I personally never been allowed to see any of my teams win a championship. So, and I think that's with a lot of people who are New York sports fans. So hopefully they swing for the fences, but we shall see. Greg Kaplan, thank you so much for coming on Talking Trade Deadline with me. Very much appreciate it. And that's pretty much all I got. We'll see what the Rangers do at the deadline. Very, very big episode next week. March Madness is coming out. Jake Kopsik's coming back on the podcast to talk brackets, just like he did last year. So I'm very excited for that. And I think that's all I got. Greg, thank you again for coming on. Very much appreciated. Make sure you guys go check out Blue Shirts Breakaway, one of the best hockey podcasts on the internet. So make sure you check that out. And we will see you next week.